Trusting him was my biggest mistake. His love was nothing but a mask, hiding the darkness beneath. I stood in front of the grand mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the delicate necklace that had been in my family for generations. The Heirloom's sapphire pendant shimmered under the soft glow of the lights, a symbol of my family's legacy and power. My reflection stared back at me, calm on the surface, but beneath it, unease crawled through my veins. Ethan's arm slipped around my waist from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "You look beautiful," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. His touch should have comforted me, but it didn't. A strange chill spread through my chest. "Are you nervous about the gala?" he asked, his voice smooth and steady. "A little," I admitted. "It's important for my father. He wants me to take a more active role in the family business." Ethan's lips curled into a small smile. "And you will. You'll be perfect, just like you always are." He kissed my cheek, but his eyes didn't match his smile. They were calculating, like he was measuring something invisible between us. I brushed off the feeling. Ethan had always been supportive, always present when I needed him. He had stood by me through the worst times, or so I thought. The gala was in full swing when we arrived. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom, casting a soft golden light over the glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. My father stood near the stage, speaking with some high-profile guests, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. He had built his empire with ruthless precision, and tonight's event was another step towards cementing our family's influence. Ethan's hand remained on the small of my back as we moved through the crowd. People smiled at us, whispered behind their hands. We were the perfect couple, admired, envied. My mother had once told me how lucky I was to have found someone like Ethan. "Lena!" A familiar voice called out. I turned and saw my cousin, Maya, gliding toward us in a shimmering silver gown. Her dark hair cascaded down her back, her eyes bright with excitement. She hugged me tightly, but her smile faltered when she glanced at Ethan. "You look stunning," Maya said, her gaze flicking to the sapphire pendant resting against my collarbone. "Thank you," I replied, though the tension in the air was palpable. Maya and Ethan had never been close. She had always been wary of him, though she never voiced her reasons directly. I had brushed off her warnings, believing that Ethan's love for me was genuine. But that night, something shifted. During the charity auction, the heirloom became the centerpiece of the night. My father's voice echoed through the hall as he announced its symbolic importance. "This pendant has been in our family for over a century. It represents strength, unity, and power." Ethan's fingers tightened around my hand. His expression was calm, but the pressure of his grip made my skin prickle. After the auction, Ethan led me toward the balcony. The cool night air brushed against my skin. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear and smiled. "You know how much I love you, right?" My heart fluttered, but unease pressed against my chest. "Of course." He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a diamond ring. The moonlight reflected off its surface, making it sparkle. "Marry me, Lena." Shock froze me in place. "Ethan." "Say yes," he urged, his eyes dark with intensity. "Yes," I whispered. He slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me deeply. The guests inside erupted into applause as we returned. My father's approval was evident in his proud smile. Maya, however, stood near the edge of the room, her expression guarded. Later that night, I woke to the sound of whispers. The room was dark, but I could hear Ethan's voice, low and sharp. Carefully, I slipped out of bed and followed the sound toward the hallway. "I did what you asked," Ethan's voice hissed. Maya's voice replied, equally sharp. "You're playing a dangerous game." Ethan's tone darkened. "You think I care? Once I have that pendant, everything will fall into place." My breath hitched. I stepped closer, peeking around the corner. Ethan stood inches from Maya, his expression hard and calculating. "I need her to trust me," Ethan said. "Once the heirloom is legally transferred to me through marriage, you'll get your cut." That was the deal. Maya's expression twisted. "And Lena, she'll have no choice but to step aside. Once I have control, her family will have no reason to keep her around." I spread through my veins. My fingers pressed against the cold wall to keep myself from falling. "You're heartless," Maya hissed. "You knew that when you agreed," Ethan said coldly. And if you think you can back out now, you're mistaken. Maya's eyes flashed with anger, but Ethan's smile remained cold. I stumbled back toward the bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. The warmth of Ethan's proposal, his tender words, his promises, all of it had been a carefully crafted lie. As I lay awake, tears burning my eyes, I thought about the pendant. The weight of my family's legacy hung around my neck like a noose. Ethan wasn't after love, he was after power, and I had given him the key to take everything from me. But not yet. The next morning, Ethan greeted me with a soft smile and a kiss on my forehead. "Did you sleep well?" I forced a smile. "Yes." He touched the pendant around my neck. "It suits you." Beneath the calm surface, rage and betrayal burned within me. He thought I was weak, thought I was a pawn in his game. But he underestimated me. I smiled up at him, my eyes steady. "I'm so lucky to have you." His smile widened. He had no idea what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't let him win. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden streaks across the marble floors. I sat at the edge of the bed, the cool air brushing against my bare skin. My fingers curled around the sapphire pendant hanging from my neck, a piece of my family's legacy, now tainted by betrayal. The weight of Ethan's deception pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. Ethan walked into the room, his hair still damp from the shower. He smiled at me, his eyes soft and warm, as if nothing had changed. But I knew better now. The mask he wore so flawlessly had slipped, revealing the cold truth beneath. "Good morning," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I forced a smile. "Morning. You didn't sleep well," he observed, brushing a stray curl behind my ear. "I guess I'm just overwhelmed." I lowered my gaze, letting my fingers trail over the pendant. His eyes darkened slightly, though his smile remained intact. "It's natural. You've taken on a lot of responsibility lately." He sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee. His touch felt foreign now, a reminder of the hidden motives beneath his affection. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Maybe you should take a break," Ethan suggested. "Let me handle some of the business for you." My chest tightened. There it was, the real reason behind his tenderness. He was positioning himself, waiting for the right moment to take everything. "I trust you," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. His smile widened. "Good. That means everything to me." Later that afternoon, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The wind tugged at my hair as I tried to clear my thoughts. Maya appeared beside me, her gaze sharp and knowing. "You're too calm," Maya said. "I have to be," I replied. Maya crossed her arms, leaning against the railing. "What's your plan?" "I don't know yet." My fingers tightened around the pendant. "But he's not getting this." Maya's eyes narrowed. "He's more dangerous than you think, Lena." "I know." My jaw tightened. "That's why I need to be smarter." Maya sighed. "I tried to warn you." I didn't listen. I turned toward her. "But I'm listening now." A flicker of approval passed across her face. "Good. Then let me help you." I hesitated. "Why would you help me after working with him?" Maya's gaze darkened. "Because I didn't know how far he'd go. I thought it was just about money." I studied her face, searching for the truth. "And now I know he doesn't plan on leaving anything behind, including you." My chest tightened. "Then we stop him." Maya's eyes sharpened. "What's the first move?" "Make him think I'm still under his spell." That evening, Ethan invited me to a private dinner at an exclusive restaurant. The setting was perfect. A candlelit table, soft music in the background, and a breathtaking view of the city below. Ethan's charm was in full force, his smile easy and his touch light. "You've been quiet," he said, pouring me a glass of red wine. "Just thinking," I replied. "About what?" I lifted the glass to my lips, watching him over the rim. "Us." His smile sharpened. "Good thoughts, I hope." "Of course." I reached across the table and brushed my fingers against his hand. "You've done so much for me. I don't know what I'd do without you." He leaned closer. "You'll never have to find out." Beneath the table, my nails dug into my palm to keep my expression steady. I couldn't let him see the storm brewing beneath the surface. "I've been thinking about the company," Ethan said casually. "Your father trusts you, but it's a lot of pressure. You could let me handle more of the responsibility. I feigned hesitation. You think so? I know so. His eyes gleamed. Together, we could take it to new heights. And the heirloom? I asked softly. His smile thinned. It would be safer if it was officially transferred to my name. That way, if anything happened, we wouldn't risk losing it. My breath caught. He was getting bolder. Maybe you're right, I said, keeping my voice light. His smile widened. Of course I'm right. You can trust me. Later that night, I lay awake, listening to the sound of Ethan's steady breathing beside me. My mind raced. He was closing in, calculating each move like a chess master. He thought I was his queen, but he was wrong. The next morning, I sat with my father in his private study. The walls were lined with dark oak shelves, heavy with the weight of generations of knowledge and power. My father's sharp eyes studied me as I sat across from him. Lena, he said, his voice calm but commanding. What's troubling you? I hesitated. Ethan wants the heirloom transferred to his name. My father's gaze sharpened. And you? I told him I'd think about it. Do you trust him? I looked down at my hands. I thought I did. My father's eyes softened for a brief moment. You have to be careful, Lena. The wrong hands could destroy everything we've built. I know. I met his gaze. That's why I need your help. My father leaned back, his expression unreadable. Tell me what you need. I need him to believe he's winning. A flicker of understanding passed through my father's eyes. And when he's vulnerable, we strike. My father smiled faintly. You are your mother's daughter. I smiled back, but the warmth didn't reach my eyes. That evening, Ethan wrapped his arms around me as we stood on the balcony. The city lights stretched out beneath us, twinkling like stars. Did you talk to your father? Ethan asked. Yes, I replied. He agreed to start the paperwork. Ethan's arms tightened slightly around me. His chest rose and fell with controlled excitement. You won't regret this, he murmured into my ear. My smile was sharp as glass. Neither will you. As Ethan kissed the side of my neck, I stared out over the city, my mind already working. He thought he had won. He thought I was his to control. But the game had just begun. The sound of rain pattering against the window mirrored the storm swirling inside me. I sat in the dimly lit library, surrounded by leather-bound books and the faint scent of aged paper. My fingers traced the edges of a sapphire pendant resting against my chest. The cold weight of it reminded me of what was at stake: my legacy, my family's honor, and my own survival. Maya entered the room, her sharp heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She leaned against the bookshelf, her arms crossed over her chest. Her dark eyes studied me with quiet intensity. You seem calm, she said. I have to be, I replied. Maya arched an eyebrow. He's making his move soon. You realize that, right? I know. My voice was steady, but my hands curled into fists on my lap. That's why we need to be ready. Maya stepped closer, lowering her voice. He's growing impatient. If you give him even a sliver of doubt, he'll change his approach. That's why I'm not giving him any reason to doubt me, I said. My eyes narrowed. He needs to think I'm still under his spell. Maya's lips curled into a small, approving smile. You're playing a dangerous game. It's the only way to win. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Ethan's presence was unmistakable, the confident stride, the deliberate pace. I forced my face into a soft expression just as he appeared in the doorway. There you are, Ethan said, his smile warm and easy. I was starting to wonder if you were avoiding me. I stood, slipping the pendant beneath my blouse. I needed a moment to clear my head. Ethan crossed the room, his gaze dark and calculating beneath the mask of charm. He brushed a lock of hair behind my ear. You've had a lot on your mind lately. I guess I have, I said softly. Maybe I can help. His hand slid down my arm, his grip light but intentional. You already have. I forced a smile. Just knowing you're with me makes everything easier. His eyes flickered with satisfaction. That's exactly where I plan to stay. Later that night, I met Maya in the small study down the hall. She closed the door behind her, her expression sharp. You're getting too close, Maya said. I have to, I replied. It's the only way to keep him from seeing what's coming. Maya's gaze hardened. And if he catches on? He won't. My jaw tightened. Because I know exactly how he thinks. Maya sat across from me, her eyes narrowing. Then why does it feel like he's still 3 steps ahead? I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Because he might be. The next morning, Ethan suggested we go for a drive. The sun was bright, casting a golden glow over the sprawling estate as he guided the car down the winding road. His hand rested casually on the steering wheel, his gaze sharp even beneath the guise of relaxation. "You've been quiet," he said. "I've been thinking," I replied. "About what?" "About us." I turned toward him, my smile soft. "About everything you've done for me." His fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. "And I'm grateful," I said, my voice low. "I don't know how I would have managed without you." His lips curled upward. "You won't have to." The road curved sharply, and Ethan's hand brushed against my leg as he steadied the wheel. My skin prickled under his touch. Every word he spoke was laced with hidden intent, a subtle reminder that he was always calculating, always watching. He pulled the car over near a cliffside overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed against the jagged rocks below, their endless roar filling the heavy silence between us. Ethan opened the passenger door and extended his hand. "Come on." I hesitated for a moment before taking it. His grip was firm as he led me toward the edge of the cliff. The salty breeze tangled through my hair as I stared down at the churning waters below. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Ethan said, standing beside me. "Yes," I whispered. "Fragile, though." His voice was soft. One wrong step, and everything could come crashing down. My breath hitched. Ethan turned toward me, his hand brushing against the small of my back. "Do you trust me?" I met his gaze, searching for the truth beneath the charm. "Of course." "Good." His smile was cold. "Because soon, everything is going to change." The edge beneath my feet felt dangerously thin. My pulse hammered in my ears as Ethan's hand lingered at my back. For a fleeting second, I wondered if he'd push me over, if he'd let me fall. But instead, he stepped back, his smile widening. "Let's head back." That evening, I stood in the grand hallway of the estate, the heavy chandelier above casting fragmented light across the polished marble floor. Ethan was in his study, talking on the phone. His voice was low, clipped, controlled. I stepped closer, pressing my back against the wall as I listened. "Yes. No, it's almost done. She won't suspect a thing." My stomach twisted. "No, the transfer will go through next week," Ethan continued. "Once it's in my name, we'll proceed with the next step." I forced myself to breathe. He laughed softly. "She's more predictable than I expected. Honestly, I thought she'd be smarter than this." My jaw clenched. A hand touched my shoulder and I nearly jumped. Maya pulled me back into the shadows, her eyes sharp. "You heard him," I whispered. Maya nodded. "I told you." A quiet rage simmered beneath my skin. Ethan thought he'd won. He thought I was weak, naive, easy to control. Maya's hand tightened on my arm. "We have to move fast." "I know," I whispered. My hands curled into fists. "He wants to take everything from me." "Then take it back," Maya said. My heart pounded as Ethan's laughter drifted through the doorway. He thought the game was over. But it was just beginning. The room was cold and silent, except for the faint crackling of the fire in the hearth. I stood near the window, watching the rain smear the glass like tears. My reflection stared back at me, hollow eyes, tense shoulders, a woman on the edge of war. I had spent months preparing for this moment, building a plan so precise that Ethan wouldn't see it coming. Now it was time to strike. Maya entered quietly, her sharp gaze sweeping across the room. "Everything is ready," she said. I turned toward her, the weight of my decision pressing against my chest. "Are you sure?" Her jaw tightened. "Positive. He won't have a way out." My fingers brushed the sapphire pendant at my neck, the only piece of my family's legacy Ethan hadn't managed to steal. He had taken everything else. But tonight, I would take it all back. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Maya slipped into the shadows as the door opened. Ethan stepped inside, his expression smooth and unreadable. He smiled, but his eyes were sharp. "You're awake," he said, closing the distance between us. "Couldn't sleep. I guess I have a lot on my mind." My voice was steady. He moved closer, his hand brushing my arm. "You know you can trust me." I forced a soft smile. Of course. His eyes narrowed slightly. Good. I stepped back toward the window, the chill from the glass seeping through my skin. Ethan's gaze followed me, his expression calculating. He could sense the shift in me, the quiet tension beneath my calm exterior. You've been different lately, he said. I turned to face him. Maybe I've just learned to see things clearly. Ethan's smile faded. Meaning? Meaning I know exactly who you are. My voice sharpened. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Careful, he said softly. Accusations can be dangerous. Only when they're false. I stepped toward him. Tell me, Ethan, was it worth it? His brow lifted. Was what worth it? Stealing my family's fortune, I said. Destroying my life. Betraying me. Ethan's smile twisted into something colder. You're overthinking things. I don't think so. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. This holds every transaction, every forged document, proof of everything you've done. Ethan's gaze darkened. Where did you get that? I smiled. You always underestimated me. He stepped forward, but I held up a hand. Careful, I warned. There are copies. Ethan's jaw clenched. What do you want? Everything you stole, I said. And more. You think you can take it back? His voice dropped to a dangerous tone. I know I can, I replied. Because you made one mistake. Ethan's lips curled. And what's that? You trusted me. The door opened, and Maya entered, flanked by 2 security guards. Ethan's eyes flashed with rage as they surrounded him. You set me up, he growled. You set yourself up, I said calmly. The guards seized Ethan's arms. He struggled, but they held him firm. His gaze burned into mine. You think this is over? I stepped toward him, my eyes level with his. No, Ethan. This is just the beginning. The guards dragged him toward the door. Ethan's gaze never left mine. You'll regret this, he said coldly. I smiled. I doubt it. After the door closed, Maya stepped beside me. It's done, she said. Not yet, I replied. There's still one more thing to finish. Later that night, I stood in Ethan's office. The fire in the hearth flickered, casting golden light across the dark wood and leather furniture. The documents lay spread out on the desk. Ownership records, bank statements, and evidence of every betrayal. I signed my name at the bottom of the last document, reclaiming my family's legacy. The weight on my chest began to lift. Maya leaned against the doorway. How does it feel? Strange, I admitted. Like I've been holding my breath for too long. You earned this, Maya said. I know. I stood, tucking the signed documents into a folder. But I'm not done yet. Maya's brow lifted. What now? I glanced toward the window, where the storm had begun to break. Now I make sure he never comes back. The next morning, I walked through the estate's grand hall. The marble beneath my heels felt solid, unshakable. Staff members nodded respectfully as I passed, their expressions lighter now that Ethan was gone. Maya met me at the front steps. It's done. All accounts have been transferred back to you. I smiled faintly. Good. And Ethan? He'll be handled, I said coolly. Maya's eyes glinted with approval. You really have changed. I had to. My gaze hardened. He stole everything from me. Now it's his turn to lose. Maya smiled. So what's next? I stepped toward the open door, the crisp morning air brushing against my skin. Now, I said, I rebuild. Maya followed me down the steps. The sunlight was bright, cutting through the lingering mist. My steps felt lighter, more certain. Ethan thought he'd broken me, thought I'd be easy to control. He never expected me to rise stronger. But I had, and now I held the power. This was my life, and I was taking it back.